Thank you very much. Good evening, members and members of the public and officers. I'm Julian Spence. I am chair of this Audit and Risk Committee. I'm very pleased to see everyone here tonight. And I particularly say welcome Councillor Gale back to the committee. We look forward to your contributions. Thank you. Tonight, we obviously have a very busy agenda. So I would remind the members that this is being webcast live. I therefore ask people to be succinct. And since I can't hear very well, I would ask you to speak up clearly to the microphones when you are asking questions. With that, I'm going to move it straight on to apologies for absence.
Thank you, Chair. We have apologies from Councillor Conor Relline and we have Councillor Zoe Barker-Lomax in attendance as substitute.
Thank you. I will also just at this point ask the officers present if they could briefly just introduce themselves so that when it comes to your turn, members of the public and members of the committee will know who you are. Thank you.
I'm Deborah Upton. I'm the Joint Head of Governance.
I'm Candice Keat, Head of Finance at Waverley.
Gillian Carson-Jones in Legal Services.
Hello, I'm Luke Harvey. I'm the Interim Joint Assistant Director for Strategy and Corporate Services.
I'm Kieran Ward. I'm the Information Governance Team Leader and Data Protection Officer.
Good evening, I'm Jenny Sturgis, the Senior Policy Officer.
Good evening, I'm Claire Upton-Brown. I'm the Joint Assistant Director of Planning.
Good evening, I'm Ezra Wallace. I'm the Joint Strategic Director for Economy, Planning and Place.
Thank you, officers. So I'll move straight to agenda item 2, which is the minutes of our meeting held on the 24th of March. And I would ask members, unless they have questions of fact that they want to raise, to confirm those minutes.
Agreed.
Agreed. Thank you. The minutes are confirmed. Kimberly, do we have any disclosure of interests?
None received prior to the meeting, Chair.
Do any members present have any items that they'd like to disclose? No. Thank you. Questions by members of the public. Kimberly, do we have any?
No, Chair, we've had none from members of the public and we've also had none from members.
Thank you very much. The next item on the agenda is for an update on local government reorganisation, which officer is present is going to give that brief update. It was Richard Bates on there or Councillor Follows. Could you give a brief update? This is really looking from a risk perspective where we are. So very briefly, thank you.
Thank you. As you'll be aware, the government consultation began yesterday. The particular risk I want to highlight was flagged up by the fact that the primary question of 2 versus 3 and the number of divisional members seems to have been kicked back to the end or middle to the end of October. So once again, that risk that we won't have enough time to do the things that we need to do in this already truncated process, I think has got more acute. One particular risk that has been highlighted and I believe has been picked up by the monitoring officer, we will not get the parliamentary element of the elections commencement, which will probably happen at some point in March. And that is very, very, very late. So the risks to actually running those elections effectively and legally are higher. And I'd also highlight the personal liability of the returning officer, and the returning officer hasn't been appointed, of course, for elections that are due in 2026 to this unitary. The narrowing of the time increases that risk further. So there are a number of legal and governance risks that I would say have got worse this week.
Thank you. Do any members have any questions of Councillor Follows on that update? Hearing none, I would just observe that we would like to, as the matters progress or don't progress, to be kept up to date. We're very conscious that it's on the risk register, and rightly so, and it's obviously a major issue for the council. Thank you. That takes us to item 7, which is also a verbal update on the SOLAS review. Again, I had Richard Bates down, but Candice, are you able to update us, or another officer, just on the status?
Chair, could I, as Richard Bates is unable to attend, could I suggest that we maybe postpone this one to the next meeting? And just as a matter of order, that we also need an update from him regarding the independent members for the committee. So I would suggest that we postpone it to the next meeting and get an update on both at the next meeting. Thank you.
Okay, I'm happy with that. I trust that other members are also happy with that. If we could action that. Thank you, Kimberly. That takes us to agenda item 8, which is an update on the SIL review. And I just would like to remind members that the purpose of having this in front of this committee is really to be looking at the governance and risk aspects, not the operational aspects of what's being happened. I think we're all aware that there are other committees, the executive, ONS, and so forth, that will be looking at these. So I would ask, as we go into this, that you keep your questions and comments germane to the scope of this committee. Thank you. Claire, would you like to briefly go through the report that you have submitted?
Yes, Chair. So not to reread the report, you've set out the purpose of the report this evening, which is ultimately to give this committee assurance that we have a robust governance arrangement in place. The report sets out a number of work streams that are currently underway, in part to reflect 2 motions to Council, one on the 28th of January 2025 and the second on the 23rd of April 2025. There are 2 working groups that have been set up, and the terms of reference and the arrangements for those groups have been agreed at earlier meetings on the 3rd of June. That's the SIL Spending Executive Working Group and the Review and Reform Executive Working Group, which is a temporary working group. There are various strands of work underway, and the working group, the temporary Review and Reform Working Group have already acknowledged the need for an urgent review as one of their first items of the SIL enforcement policy. As you've already referred to, there is a report that is due to be considered by Overview and Scrutiny Committee, which is in response to the motion on the 28th of January and sets out a proposed discretionary review process for householders SIL. That report will go on to the executive meeting of the 1st of July. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Claire. Members, anyone have questions or comments? I would recognise this. I think Councillor Austin has registered to speak on this. So, Councillor Austin, do you wish to speak at this point? Okay, thank you. Members of the committee, questions or comments on this report? Thank you. Councillor Zook.
Yes, hello. I've got 3 questions. One relating to the departure from the full council mandate, the second relating to conflicting KC opinions, and the third relating to equalities duties. Right, so the first one is, so the full council passed a democratic resolution to apply the West Berkshire style review, but Waverley's proposed discretionary SIL householder review diverges materially from both the full council mandate from January and the successful West Berkshire precedent. While presented as a form of review, it excludes the overwhelming majority of affected cases. Is the executive legally entitled to depart from full council's voted position on the scope of this review, and has it undertaken a risk assessment? That's my first question. Shall I go on or shall I wait?
I'm going to turn it to our legal advisor. Thank you.
Thank you. So the application of a SIL discretionary review is a matter for the executive. It is not a function of the full council, and therefore it can't be undertaken by the full council.
Thank you. And did it carry out a risk assessment?
I think the advice you've given is a matter of how the governance around. So there is no risk assessment associated with the governance of meetings within the council.
Right. Second one relates to the conflicting KC opinions. So the council has received
So, yes. Sorry, Councillor, could you speak up a little? Thank you.
Okay, yeah. The council has received contradictory legal opinions, one supporting discretionary powers and the other asserting limited discretion. Why is Waverley adopting only the restrictive interpretation when an alternative professional opinion exists? And do Waverley accept that the two conflicting opinions could lead to a judicial review?
So in answer to that question, council has sought its own legal advice, and the advice that has been given has been accepted by officers as a robust position. We have had shared with us an alternative opinion, but we are not cited on the questions that Casey was asked, and it isn't our legal advice, it's advice to a third party. In terms, and I've completely forgotten the second part of your question, so I should have written that down.
Does it not open us to judicial?
Oh yeah, that was it. So any decision the council makes is open to judicial review, and as officers we give you advice in accordance with the law, accepting that we may be challenged, the council may be challenged, and regularly are, certainly in the context of planning, on the decisions it makes.
Okay, and then third question, please. So on the equalities side of things, so under the public sector equalities duty, the council must have due regard to the impacts when designing its review. So, you know, I'm sure you all know them, cited in the Equality Act. Failure to properly assess these risks may render both the EIA and the review process itself vulnerable to legal challenge. Has Waverley lawfully discharged its public sector equality duty when adopting the discretionary review?
So first of all, maybe I could just clarify that we obviously haven't adopted a discretionary review yet, because that is a matter for executive to consider on the 1st of July. So there is a qualities assessment attached to the report, which we believe to be robust.
Sorry, I'll say that again. Apologies that Councillor Hyman has also registered to speak. I just asked Councillor Hyman whether he'd like to speak now or later on.
I think now I've got no problem with that, if that's okay by you. Sorry, I can't switch my camera on. I don't know what, I was on Teams earlier and it wouldn't let me, and there's some problem there, it seems, but we won't worry about that now. My first question might be something that officers could perhaps answer in writing later, as it goes a little bit more to process perhaps than this. But there has to be concern that it seems that self-builds may be excluded from this review. Is that true? And if so, why? So I'll park that. You may or may not want to ask officers to answer it, Chairman. The issue here is that 6.5, as Councillor Barker-Lomax has said, 6.5 says the council's governance arrangements for the allocation and spending of SIL money collected is an executive function. I would assume, therefore, that policy and collection are not an executive function, and so the January council decision should stand. I mean, I can't see how that and I think that's something we really need to interrogate rather than just be told. We need to get into that to make sure that we are doing the right thing at all times. I think the problem here that we've got, specifically referring to paragraph 6.13, which says the Audit and Risk Committee note that all the work with all the work undertaken by the council, the underlying principles of transparency, fairness and good governance are being upheld. I mean, I think the problem here is that affected residents are all saying, with apparently ample evidence, that we're doing the opposite. And of course, you know, it must be a matter of perception as well as simply what we're being told in the chamber. I know our briefings are secret; they're off the record, Chatham House. That could be argued that it's hardly transparent. It says here the legal advice obtained by the council on CIL liability be openly shared, with the council choosing to waive its legal professional privilege. That's great, but can the true legal position be fully interrogated? I think the audit committee needs to make sure that we are, as members, able to fully interrogate the true legal position with clear government advice, because they're the ones who are likely to be making a challenge, if anybody. So in order that members can be certain that they are truthfully and transparently informed on this, alternative, but possibly contradictory, I suppose, legal opinions must also be sought and published. I don't think it's good enough simply to say that officers accept that that it's a robust opinion that they have. It's for us as members making the decision, responsible for the decision, to accept that we have that we're acting on correct legal advice. So you know, can we obtain, and will you as chairman of the audit committee please commit to ensuring that we're able to obtain legal opinions, have them sought and published in respect of all possible or proposed solutions? I think that's a most important thing to us, and from what Councillor Barker-Lomax was saying, she would agree with that. It's also, and finally, paragraph 14.2 says concerns previously been raised about perceived impartiality, etc., etc. It's vital that we act transparently and lawfully. And there's some supposed assurance in that paragraph that everything's going to be proper, but as we all know, external advice and assurance does not necessarily equate to the truth. I mean, you know, I've personally got 25 years of experience of knowing that for a fact. Without adherence to the duty of candour, being able to get an answer to a straight question, and the opportunity, or indeed the right, to firstly properly scrutinise both sides of the story, and secondly to be able to fully interrogate all independent, supposedly independent, and all paid for professional advice, then members and residents that we serve cannot have confidence that this promised new standard that we're setting here of truth and fairness and accountability is likely to be achieved by what's going on, by the review that we're doing. So will you please, as a chair of audit, commit to ensuring that we do get answers, that you will support us in the in obtaining answers to questions, in ensuring that the duty of candour is satisfied. It's a legal duty of candour, because that's where we could get challenged, in order to make sure that that this is not just a narrow review that comes up with the answers that the people who are paying for it, the officers on behalf of residents, are telling us that's what they want to do. You know, it has to be member-led and it has to be candour-led. So could you commit that you will support us?
Thank you, Councillor Hyman. I think you've made your point.
I'd like to know the answers. Thank you very much indeed, Chairman, for letting me ask.
Well, indeed, I think this audit committee is very clear that, you know, transparency and good governance are exactly what we are looking to have from officers on this. I, for one, have a lot of confidence in our internal audit function, which is an independent exercise. So to take your point on 14.2, I believe that will be satisfied when it comes to that external assurance, the audit that will be completed. in terms of the legal opinions, I'm somewhat concerned that you are asking us to almost do a trawl of opinions until we get whatever the correct answer might be, and that correct answer is obviously one that different people have interpretations on. The council has published the advice given by the KC that they have engaged for this, and I believe that is a transparent way of acting. Thank you.
But we can't interrogate that.
You can interrogate that and ask questions of that, but that is the opinion that the council has been given. Thank you. Councillor Atkin. Sorry, Councillor Austin, I do beg your pardon.
Yes, Councillor Austin here. I just wanted to speak tonight about my worry about governance risk. In January, we voted as a council for a discretionary review of SIL in line with West Berkshire. At that point, we all knew what in line meant. In line means to match or agree with. It doesn't mean to do something which is not very much like it at all, which is what we've ended up with. West Berkshire, to clarify, was a justice-based review, recognising the unfairness of SIL, so that if people who had filled out the forms incorrectly, they would have been exempt. If they had filled them incorrectly, then they got their liability notice cancelled and/or a refund from the SIL pot. Now, is what we have in front of us, does it match that motion in January? It's nothing like it. Were councillors and officers aware in January of what that meant? Well, they've been bombarded with enough information by that point. I don't think it's unreasonable that they would absolutely have known what that meant. And certainly, I know the leader and other officers were sent that review like last September. So, you know, what I'm concerned about is we are exposing ourselves to huge risk. And in doing this review, what we're doing is finding ways not to achieve the outcome of that January motion, rather than doing a risk assessment on taking the course of action as a full council we agreed to take, which was a discretionary review of SIL in line with West Berkshire. Why do we not see in front of us a risk assessment of the West Berkshire proposal, which sits outside of SIL legislation? So it's just very disappointing. We're 6 months on, and we have significant risk in front of us now because we have not answered the motion in front of us in January. I just wanted to post a correction in the documents. 6.11 says, in line with the motion of 28th of January, the council via its leader will be lobbying government. That was the April motion. And it's interesting, look, 6.11, you've used in line. In line with, what does that mean? In line with the council motion, the leader will lobby government on shoes? No, it means the government leader will lobby government on how SIL operates. That's what I read it to be. That's what I read the January motion to be. We've got a serious governance issue here if we're not following the will of council. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Murray.
Thank you, Chairman. So I've got a couple of elements I want to touch on. One is governance, and the other one is risks, if I may. And it's purely my opinion of the risks, and that's what we're here to judge risks, I believe. But I'd like to ask on the governance element of it, why were councillors allowed a vote on the 28th of January, which says in line with West Berks, if we weren't allowed to approve it? If that wasn't the thing, I think what it made was that it just created unfair expectation of the councillors who were wishing that element of it, and also obviously it created unfair expectations of the residents who are been who have been victims of the of what's happened. So I'm really concerned that when we had this motion and it came through, I was one who said, brilliant. This is what a revelation. The whole council has come together, all different parties of it. And I was accused of being naive, but I said, no, I'm optimistic. This is all a really good thing. And we've all come to, I don't know whether you remember that, Jerome, we were in that meeting together, and it was it made me feel as a councillor, great, we've achieved something here, and this is a really good thing. So I thought, great, this is what's going to happen. And it's disappointing beyond belief that this is not what's happened. So you can understand why councillors and residents are upset, because they were sort of led to believe that this was going to happen on the 28th of July. But also, does it mean that future motions, which are agreed by full council, that they can also subsequently be not approved by the council, but they also have to, they're only executive functions. So it was it just seems really undemocratic and unfair. And as a councillor, we come here to represent people, and we hope that we try and make a difference, and we try and correct errors if we can. And it just seems like it doesn't look very good that we all agreed it on the 28th of January with good faith. Everybody in this council agreed it. The executive, all 50, was unanimous. And I think we all came out of there thinking, okay, great, this is going to fix the issues which are there. And it now hasn't. So that is my issue with the governance element of it. I'm not expecting anyone to comment on that, and they could if they want, but that is how I feel as a councillor. And I could be wrong. And they may well, you might be absolutely right, Joyce, that constitutionally it wasn't correct. We shouldn't have done it. We didn't have approval for it. We didn't have the right to do it. And I you can find that in the constitution. I'm not saying you are wrong and that it's not right, but it did set expectations for everybody. You can agree with that, right? Yeah. So if I can talk about risks, right? About the risks of the report, surely. Am I allowed, sorry, Chairman, am I allowed to talk about what the perceived risks are? Because in the report, it does indicate some risks. And, I'd just like to touch, am I okay to touch on them? Yes. Okay, thank you. So there's 3 or 4 in there, and it talks about the risk of a legal challenge for cherry picking SIL legislation. Okay, so no one's challenged it at West Berks. The risk of developers challenging the SIL liability, which they have. It's a householders one, purely householders, and it's time limited. So I don't see that being a high risk. And also it's not been challenged at West Berks. A risk of a legal challenge by the government, which is probably the main one because you're breaking the rules of SIL. Well, that's low. No such challenges have been brought to West Berks, and they've finished their review and it's been done. So, and also there's been discussions at government level about it, and they may well come down on the fact that, yes, they were right. So you could well end up being on the wrong side of the decision. So that's those legal risks. The other risk was no independent person can be found to adjudicate. Now, we're only talking, I think we're talking about a dozen people here, and we've allocated £75,000 to this element of it. So that works out at £6.5 grand per case. Now, I don't think we can find someone who won't do it for £6.5 grand. I mean, we're going to struggle. I mean, it seems like money for old rope, if you ask me. So I don't see that being a risk. And then the other risk was that money in the SIL pot should not be used to pay refunds. So that's I can see that, and I understand it. But in cases where there was never collected the money, and if the paperwork was correct, then they would have been exempt and you wouldn't have had the money, and you still haven't got the money, so you're not losing any money. And if residents have been the ones who've paid it and you're sitting with this money in your SIL pot, and it's not a great deal, but you've been claiming the interest on that thing and using it in the general fund. So there's no reason why you can't, if their money is sitting in the SIL fund, it's been gaining interest and you've been using it, why can't you just use that to pay them back? So really, we're not talking large sums of money. So that is a couple of the risks I've looked at. But in conclusion, Mr. Chairman, if I could, do any of these risks outweigh the reputational damage already caused by what's happened, and we've all read the news and seen the radios things, and everybody's talked about it. The reputational damage for the council for being uncaring, unflexible, lack of justice. This cannot be right. And it can go away tomorrow. All you have to do, all the executive have to do to decide is to have a review in line with West Berks. And that's the risk you've got to take. And if you're weighing up those two risks, that is my thing. That's what should happen. Thank you, Julie.
Thank you, Councillor Murray. Do any other councillors have, it's Councillor Higgins.
Councillor Murray's right in terms of reputational risk, and I think the longer this goes on, the risk does increase. So we're obviously aware there's going to be a review and work in terms of a committee. I would urge them to do that as quickly as possible. But my questions are around, obviously the motion in January allowed householders to have a discretionary or request a discretionary review between a window of the 1st June to 31st of May next year. And I just want to sort of get better understanding of how that's going to work. So how do householders make that request? Where would residents find that information?
Can I just say, I think you're potentially veering into matters that the ONS will look at in terms of the detail, but if the officer would like to respond.
Yeah, I'm quite happy to just confirm. So we've already got a web page that is updating the residents that have come forward and indicated that they may apply for a discretionary review if one is set up. And we're in correspondence with those 4 residents to update them. If the exec agree the recommendation on the 1st of July, then the webpage will be further updated. There will be a specific email address for applicants of the review to submit a series of information, and all the information required will be on the web page so that they can be in no doubt what they need to put forward to the council to enable that review to take place. There will also be an indication of the likely time involved in undertaking that review, because there's potentially a lot of paperwork to look through, and so it's not something that someone will be able to undertake in 10 minutes. There will also be a full report that will be published as part of that review process.
Thank you for your indulgence, Mr. Chairman. I'm not going to comment on the substance for one particular reason, which is that if I do, then I'll be subject to predetermination for the executive meeting itself. So I'm just going to ask a couple of questions and respond to something that was just said. Councillor Austin has said a couple of times the phrase acting outside of the legislation, which is a phrase that, if you were to apply more broadly, is something that should concern anybody in elected office, because acting outside the legislation means probably you're doing something that's unlawful. And I think just to comment on the validity of the motion at council, the monitoring officer would always intervene if at the time the motion was put, there was reason to think that it was ultra vires or unlawful in some way. And I think in the case of this motion, the legal advice was obviously sought following the motion, which has then raised questions as to whether it's a valid motion or not. I think that's procedurally, governance-wise, how we've got into the situation that we're in with that. Can I just confirm, though, I have read the legal advice, and I hope everybody here has done so as well. We can only withdraw a liability notice where the council itself has made an error, and this is probably directly to the head of planning. It is my understanding that if we are able to find a person who will do these reviews, and I would just comment to Councillor Murray's point, I think there is a risk of not being able to find somebody to do those reviews, because there is a lot of reputational baggage attached to this process. So that is not an unrealistic risk, actually. Is it likely that the independent person, Claire, will give an opinion as to what other issues are at play here? So if they're going through the appellant's paperwork, if there is a clear error of the council and the liability notice can withdraw, I am assuming they will say so. But if there are other if there are other errors that were made, if there's an issue with the appellant's consultant or any of those other sorts of issues that are effectively those second order issues that residents are concerned about, would it be your expectation that that independent person will give full opinion on that subject in their response?
Yeah, in answer to the question, whoever is willing to take up this task will be recommending whether or not a liability notice should be withdrawn based on the evidence they find, but they will also be looking for learning. Now, accepting that some of these reviews will go back to cases as early as 2019, so they are historic cases, but part of the brief to that person will be to give learning, and that will come through. So the 6 monthly reports that will come to exec confirming the outcome of any review that we have carried out, but it will also confirm any learning that has been picked up along that review process and the action that we will take to implement that learning.
Thank you. I've realised that Councillor Austin and Councillor Murray have both got their hands up. You've both had chances already. So could I ask you to, I'll come back to you, but very briefly. And then I think Councillor Beeman, you also wanted to comment. Councillor Austin.
Thank you. I just wanted to sort of flag 2 other risks. The proposed review in front of us, well, I've gone through the cases. I estimate 80 to 90% of these people will not actually even be able to apply for it. Never mind stand a chance of a refund. So that leads on to that. So that's a risk. So that leads on to my second risk, is that we do not deliver for our residents a fair, reasonable and just outcome from this process. Now, if we are prohibiting and reducing the opportunity for people to even apply to a scheme, how on earth are we mitigating our risk? And I just finally want to reinforce this issue about reputational damage to our council. As councillors, it is on us to do the right thing by residents. We make the judgment. We need to be the people that do that.
Thank you, Councillor Austin. Councillor Murray.
Sorry, just one small thing then, Chairman, is that have we asked Jeff Brooks at West Berks whose independent person they used, and could we ask them? I mean, why wouldn't we use the independent person from there?
Thank you for that observation. I'm sure that will be taken into consideration.
Absolutely. I'm already talking to the market about suitably qualified, experienced people of the calibre that we need.
We've spent a long time on this. I'm going to bring in Councillor Beeman, and then I suggest we go to the resolution.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. The recommendation before the Audit and Risk Committee, I don't think goes far enough, and I would like to propose a slight alternative recommendation, for which I have a second, by the way. I appreciate that members of the Audit and Risk Committee are only being asked to review the application and administration of the community infrastructure levy in Waverley, and not the details of the proposed discretionary review. Matters of detail are to be considered by the meeting of the Services Overview and Scrutiny Committee that is being held on Monday the 23rd of June. My comments are therefore restricted to the governance arrangements. The Audit and Risk Committee has a broad responsibility, and I would like to remind members that the Audit and Risk Committee of Waverley Borough Council is a key component of Waverley's corporate governance arrangements. It provides an independent and high-level focus on the audit, assurance and reporting arrangements that underpin good governance and financial standards. The company's purpose is to provide an independent and high-level focus on the adequacy of governance, risk and control arrangements. In my opinion, this matter raises a more fundamental question. At the end of the day, accepting that some decisions are delegated to the executive, the final responsibility for making key decisions must rest with full council. At the full council meeting held on the 20th of January, the following motion was approved unanimously, including from those members of the executive who were present, without any vote being necessary. That being, as we all know, resolved that in line with West Berkshire, householders previously subject to civil liability can request a discretionary review by the council within a window from 1st of June 2025 to 31st May 26. Subsequently, members were advised by the monitoring officer that the decision was an executive function rather than a decision requiring approval by full council. The question has to be asked, why members were not advised of this before the motion was passed and recorded in the minutes? Even if members had been advised of the fact that all members of the executive who were present supported the recommendation, what therefore has happened to for members on the executive to collectively change their minds? If members of the executive did change their minds, surely all members of full council have the ultimate responsibility to take the final decision. There are unlikely to be many occasions when views of full council would be contrary to the views of the executive. On this occasion, there are a number of risks to pursuing the discretionary review as proposed, for which the Audit and Risk Committee requires some reassurance that all these risks have been fully taken into account. First and foremost being that the full council are not being fully involved in the decision-making process. This council's reputation is at stake. There's already been a significant media attention on this matter, which has not presented the council in a good light. Whilst the council is taking legal opinion, at great expense no doubt, this differs from the legal opinion given to those affected. As the leader stated on more than one occasion, legal opinion depends on the question asked. And in my personal opinion, and it is my personal opinion, the question asked of the case employed by the council was far too narrow in its focus. It seems that the difference between the two cases is just opinion with little substance in case law. There's a real risk that the council may well be faced with a judicial review, and assurance needs to be sought that this very real risk, with the costs and potential consequences for the council's reputation involved, have been taken into account. We also need to be mindful of Waverley's corporate strategy, which defines its commitment to its residents. And I quote, "Waverley Borough Council aims to treat people and the environment with respect and kindness, and to conduct its council business in an open, inclusive, timely and democratic way, fair to all residents, no matter what the personal circumstances." The Audit Committee needs to be assured that with regard to the proposed sole discretionary review, this commitment to residents is being fulfilled. It is against this background that I wish to propose the following alternative recommendation. That the Audit and Risk Committee resolves to note that the governance arrangements in place to review the council's application and administration of the community infrastructure levy, but seeks assurance that in pursuing the proposals for a discretionary still review, the council take account of an objective assessment of the risks involved. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Beeman. Does anyone wish to comment on that amendment? I think I've heard.
Happy to second.
Sorry.
Chair. Yeah, happy to second.
Thank you. Does anyone wish to debate on that?
Chair, the word council should be executive. It's the executive that are taking the decision and need to be taking this into account. Would you like me to give that advice?
Yes, if you could.
Thank you, members. As you've already heard, it is the executive that are taking the decision. So the word council in the amendment should in fact be changed to seeks assurance that in pursuing the proposals for discretionary seal reviews, the executive take account of an objective assessment of the risks involved. The executive do, of course, anyway, get the risks presented to them as part of their usual reporting.
Councillor Follows.
Just as an aside, I'm obviously not a member of this committee. I certainly don't have any vote here. And I certainly don't disagree with what you're proposing. I think it's just worth me asking if you could define what you mean by an objective risk assessment. We've quibbled over the word aligning with. I mean, we are presented, as the governance officer has just said, we are presented with the risk assessments as part of our process for executive business. Your amendment says an objective risk assessment. I would just ask that to be defined.
Objective, subjective. Defining objective is that it would take a very, I think it becomes so properly emotionally charged, this particular issue, that we're in great difficulty when people are taking stands at spaces which are one might say politicized, which is sad. But I mean, I say objective being somebody from taking a backstage view of it all in a rational way.
Thank you, Councillor Beeman. If members are happy, I would then propose that we now I think resolve the amendment, and I will read it again for members. That the Audit and Committee Risk Committee resolves to note the governance arrangements in place to review the Council's application and administration of the Community Infrastructure Levy, but seeks assurance that in pursuing the proposals for discretionary CIL reviews, the Executive take account of an objective assessment of the risks involved. Members, do it.
Chair, could I just, for the sake of clarity, so we would say that we always provide an objective risk assessment with our reports. Risks are dealt with within the council by officers that are not necessarily the officers involved. So for the sake of you saying objective risk assessment, it will be the same risk assessment following the council's standard methodology that you have all agreed that the executive will be considering.
Councillor Murray.
Thank you. Could that risk assessment not be attached to the ONS report? Because it isn't at the moment. And that's why, when I was talking about risks, I was saying, well, I think these ones are low. So who is saying which ones are low, which ones are mean? Is the reputational risk and the damage which is already occurring and continues, is that higher than the other one? We do it on all the other risk assessments we do. We have a risk register. We're going to get to it shortly. That has it. So could we have that attached to the ONS report? I think it would be useful, I think.
Yeah, if I may, thank you, Councillor Murray. Really important point that's raised here. So I'll just refer councillors to the reports being published for ONS. There is a section there on risks. What we'll do, I think, is a really important line of inquiry for ONS to further interrogate that. And as officers, we'll take on board the feedback we've heard from the committee this evening, and also the feedback that we get at overview and scrutiny as well on those risks that are set out in the reports.
Thank you. Do I have, can I ask members to support or in favour of the resolution? Are you asking for a vote? In favour of the resolution as amended by Councillor Beeman? I believe that's a unanimous recommendation from the committee. Thank you very much. And thank you, officers and members. We shall now turn to item 8 on our agenda. Sorry, we shall now turn to item 8 on our agenda, which is the fraud investigation summary that we repeat. And I would ask Jose Ribeiro to briefly outline the report. I'm also noting that Councillor Austin is registered to speak on this item. Oh. Okay, thank you. Is Officer Ribeiro? He's online.
I'm online. Evening, everyone. These are the annual recorded outcomes for 24-25 related to housing tenancy fraud. We recovered 5 tenancies and cancelled 3 right to buys and 4 housing applications. And this resulted in a total saving of just over £703,000. And that's it. That's the summary.
Thank you, Officer. Members, do you have any questions or comments on this? So, Councillor Higgins.
Jose, thank you very much again for such a good report and all your hard work. In previous meetings, we've discussed about the potential to give you additional resource to help you with this. Is that in progress? Where are we with that?
Yes, thank you. I've had a meeting this week, and I'm meeting again tomorrow with Alana Norman, who and we're going to look over the job descriptions. So that is progressing. Thank you.
Thank you. Officer, I had one question, which is on page 17 of your report. There seems to be a big increase in the referrals in the year to you. I think it's 122 against 80 last year and 70 the year before. Is there a particular reason for that? Is that referrals coming, and where are those referrals coming from?
Well, I think the majority of these this increase has been due to the drop in the right to buy discount that was implemented in November. There was a significant increase of referrals in referrals regarding right to buys. So I review every single right to buy application that comes through the council. So I have to look at all of those.
Thank you. Councillor Murray.
Sorry, Jose, could you elaborate on why that would be the case? Are people wanting to stay on and not pay their rent, or want to move out? Or, I mean, it seems a bit of a unusual thing, but if you could elaborate on that, would be quite interesting.
Yeah, regarding the right to buy discount.
Yeah, I know what it is, and I know what happened, but why has it had a big impact on recovery of monies?
It's not on recovery of money. It's got to do with the amount of referrals that come across my desk. So every case that comes through to me, I have to review every right to buy that is submitted to the council. So because there was such a significant increase in the right to buys, my caseload increased.
Okay, sorry. Thanks very much for clarifying. I appreciate it. Well done.
I would like to echo Councillor Higgins in thanking you for the work that you do, and I think the amounts you recover are very good. So I'd like to recommend that this audit committee notes this fraud investigation activity. All those members in favour? Agreed. Thank you very much. Thank you, Councillor, and thank you, Officer Rivera. So we'll now go on to the item 10, which is the draft annual governance report. And this committee is being asked to receive this draft governance statement. It's for 2024-25, and we are invited to raise any potential emerging governance issues that may need to be addressed. Candice, would you like to take us through this?
Thank you very much, Chair. So the annual governance statement comes to the audit committee every year. It's one of the requirements of our final accounts that we publish this annually. Our deadline for publishing will be 30th of June this year. So this is a draft version, and as the Chair said, this is your opportunity to make comments of anything you think is missing from the document, any governance issues that you think should be raised within this document. What you'll notice if you've been on the audit committee for a while is this is a redesign compared to what you've seen in prior years. We've worked really closely with Guildford Borough Council colleagues, but also the Chief of Staff, Laura, has done a really, I think, great job in making this a much more readable document. Contained within the document are highlighted any governance changes within the year, but also an action plan for 25-26 of what we're going to address in terms of governance. I'm not proposing to say anything else, but I'm happy now to take any comments or amendments that you'd like.
Councillor Davidson.
A small point of presentation. Would it be at all possible, Candice, to have usage or the spelling out the mnemonics which are included here? This is a document which is open to our residents to look at. Will they understand SIPFA? Will they understand SOLACE? HRA, RAG? I think if you look at the document, dare I say, provided by the IT folk, I was just about to say crowd, but that was probably not the right thing to say. They've spelt out these mnemonics fully in the text, and I think that'd be worthwhile doing. Just as a comment on the presentation, I think it's a huge improvement on what was done before. It made it much more succinct and less wordy. Would it be inappropriate to ask about progress against all these June dates, or is that something for our next meeting?
Thank you, Councillor. Absolutely, and take on board we'll either add a glossary or we might just spell it out fully, but either way, we'll definitely look at that and make sure that's included. Thank you very much. I think what it normally is this is alongside our statement of accounts, which does have a glossary, but I think this does need a separate one, so I will deal with that. In terms of the updates on the June, so this would be the joint consultation review group and the publish of the delivery plan for 25-26. Delivery plan, actually, Luke can probably pick up on. I know it's published, I think. I'll let him pick up on that. In terms of the joint constitution review group, we'll bring an update next time in terms of if those things have been updated, because I'm not entirely sure.
I must say, I do welcome having a plan.
Any other councillors wish to comment on here? I had a couple of points. One, I'd like to echo Councillor Davison. I think the revised format reads so much better than the previous version, and I think it's easier for the public to understand, which I think is a really important part of this AGS statement. I'm with Councillor Davison in that some of the abbreviations. I had a C2 grading of houses that perhaps need to be enlarged to make sure that the members of the public do understand this. And one minor, or two things, one minor one, at the bottom of page 32, we talk about scheme of officer delegation provides that officers are not able to take key decisions. I think they should be capitalized to make sure that people recognize it is actually a formal term. And also, was I wrong in thinking between pages 36 and 37, was there a page missing, or I just thought it didn't follow terribly well between bottom of page 36 and page 37 where you have a chart? You could
I think you're correct, Chair, and we will look at that.
If I'm correct, could you circulate a revised version to members of the committee? As the officers said, we are asked to note and comment on this AGS. It's a draft and it will be presented to us again in September, is that correct?
Yes, it'll be hopefully September, if that's when audit are ready to sign off our accounts. Absolutely.
Indeed. So I'd ask the members to note and comment on the draft annual government statement, and the committee is invited to raise any potential emerging governance issues for consideration. I believe we have done that. Is everyone happy?
So, Chairman.
Thank you very much.
Sorry, Chairman, I did indicate to speak on this item. I think.
I do apologise, Councillor Hyman. You did indeed. My apologies. Please go ahead.
Just wanted to raise particularly that there are the questions of the January SIL motion and also the March grounds maintenance misinformation, I suppose the word I'll use, and inconsistencies, which were within that 24-25 year. They may become significant governance issues, and could I ask that those be flagged up so that they don't come and bite us on the backside for not having mentioned them, although they're things which are not resolved. They are a risk. They involve things which need to be flagged. But more importantly, and for an example, if I can just very quickly take you forward to page 61 of your documents, which is an item that I haven't indicated to speak on. But that talks about the local plan, and the first paragraph is it. The statements in there are plain false. It's clear that the council is in denial in respect of what National Planning Policy Framework 2024 paragraph 195 says, and we're talking about the council's claim that it is important that it does not have a 5-year housing land supply. This is something which I have acted as whistleblower on for nearly 20 years now, this issue, which is non-compliance with the habitats legislation. It's a very simple matter and I've raised it numerous times through the annual government statement, and it's my responsibility to do so, Chairman. The question is always, where's the required evidence of the effectiveness of Natural England's SANG and SAM projects? and calling Farnham Park a sang. The Joint Strategic Partnership Board papers for tomorrow's meeting confirm that despite the 20 years intervening since 2005, when this became a problem in law, that the Council and Natural England still cannot demonstrate mitigation is at all effective. The 2023 visitor survey of the Thames Basin East Spa showed that visitor numbers have increased in line with development. So in effect, if that is the case, then we are selling planning permissions for mitigation which is unproven, unlawfully. And so I have to raise that, and it should be raised as a major risk. It's coming be a big issue coming up within the new local plan. We have to have that to grant that assessment of the mitigation to be able to grant consents lawfully. We don't have one, yet we keep granting consents. And 20 years on, everybody is still in denial, those with vested interests, of course. And the other issue which needs to be raised, Chairman, if I may, it's my responsibility, is regarding air quality and compliance with that legislation, where the current Air Quality Action Plan requires an assessment which can only come from, and the Air Quality Action Plan states in it that we would get a proper modelling of the air quality and traffic impact to the Farnham infrastructure project, and that has been evaded. This is a serious risk for our businesses in Farnham and a serious risk for reputations of a number of councillors, and that needs to be flagged up as well. That the council is going ahead. Surrey County Council is going ahead without Waverley satisfying its own responsibilities in respect of air quality legislation, and that will be it for now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Hyman. And obviously, I think there you perhaps strayed into some of the aspects that we look at when we look at the risk register, and you're quite right to point out that there is a risk on there on the local plan. I would point out that is flagged as red, therefore as one of the significant risks to the council.
No, it's actually governance and a governance issue, Chairman, that I'm raising, and a matter of legal compliance, and that is where the risk comes from. But the issue isn't simply a matter of risk; it's legal compliance, and that is serious.
Indeed, thank you. Councillor Follows.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not going to comment on the second half of what Jerry said, but on the first bit, recognising governance failures within the year, I just want to emphatically support that comment, that there be some paragraph put in there about this. Probably just assessing the root cause of that failure, and also noting the mitigations that have followed on from that, of which there are many in the governance sphere, not just from the Joint Constitutions Review Group, but also through the management of executive procedure and the governance at that level as well. So I strongly support that being included fully.
Will officers take that on board, please?
Yes, Chair, absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'd ask the committee to note this draft AGS. Thank you. Thank you very much. That now leads us on to the risk management and the review of the risk register. Jenny, would you like to lead us through the report? And I'm sure that members will have read it and will have a number of questions if you could be succinct on your questions, because I'm conscious of the time. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, councillors. Following the adoption of the Council's new risk management strategy earlier this year, the new strategy came into effect from the 1st of April 2025. This review of the corporate risk register for Q4 was in line with the new framework. The risks included in the strategic risk register were reviewed for relevance and in view of the Council's new risk appetite, and scored according to the new scoring criteria. As a result, some of the risks included in the Q4 risk register have changed, and you'll notice that no direction of travel is included for this quarter. I'm very happy to answer any questions the committee may have. If I'm unable to provide a response this evening, I'd be happy to follow up with relevant officers and provide a written response. Thank you.
Thank you, Officer. Could I just ask, before we open it up to the members, just to confirm, when we talk about the inherent risk and the residual risk and then the target risk, that, well, certainly my understanding being that the inherent risk is really the risk that we have before any controls or mitigations are put in place. The current or the residual risk is with the controls and mitigations we have in place at the moment. And to be slightly sort of briefer, the target risk is really where we would like to be in an ideal world, recognizing that you can't eliminate all risk, but you want to manage some of it. Is that a fair summary?
That's correct, Chair.
Thank you. Members, do any members have questions on the risk register? Councillor Higgins, and Councillor Barker-Lomax, and then Councillor Beeman.
Thank you, Jenny. Great report as usual. Page 67, which relates to cybersecurity, under mitigations and controls, we've got some good things about systems, networks, training, and that sort of thing. I would gain some comfort to know if there's been any tests, such as like penetration tests and dates of those tests took place. I'll push on that with officers at item 13, but I was wondering if that's something we could include within that report.
So I'm happy to come back with a response. Obviously, with the nature of this risk, the team specifically didn't want to go heavy on the detail because obviously that opens up to further risk. So hence we light on the detail, but we are able to obviously provide you with more information directly.
Yes, not you know, verbatim everything that was done in terms of tests, but it might be like phishing exercise 2024 or May 2024, something like that, just so that we know there's been checks on those controls.
Thank you. Councillor Barker-Lomax.
So with regards to SR4 on page 62, oh, sorry. So just an open question, which is, I just want to understand, why does failing to deliver on the new figure risking losing local control over development lead to increased pressure on inadequate infrastructure? I just didn't get the secretary there. And then I have a second question, but please go ahead.
So if I can come in on that. As part of plan making, we plan spatially and then we plan the infrastructure needed to support that growth. If we are in a position where we don't have an up-to-date plan, we don't have a 5-year housing land supply, then some of that growth is happening outside what's called the infrastructure delivery plan. That's the plan that identifies what infrastructure is needed and is worked on with the key providers of that infrastructure, because obviously the Borough Council has limited infrastructure it delivers directly. So it's that interrelationship between a planned process that plans for infrastructure where the infrastructure delivery partners are aware of the growth that is going to happen against a situation where you have no 5-year housing land supply, so growth is coming forward in an unplanned way and doesn't have reference to infrastructure delivery plan and therefore isn't referenced to those key infrastructure providers. I hope that explains it because it sounds quite...
Yeah, no, a bit more, thank you. And then my second question is, so on SR4, we say that the gross risk is, 4 times 5, which is 20. The residual risk is 4 times 5, which is 20. Given that the likelihood is almost certain, can we not deduce that our mitigating actions are not adequate? Because there's no change in the risk there.
I understand the question. I mean, the mitigation is to move forward as quickly as we can with preparing the evidence to support a new local plan. Obviously, there is risk attached with moving forward too quickly, that we end up with an evidence base that isn't robust enough, that doesn't stand up to examination when we get to the local planning inquiry.
Could I suggest that officers just reflect on that scoring? Because I do sense it doesn't inherently make much sense, other than obviously I think we're all aware that there is a significant risk out there that we can't yet mitigate because we don't have everything in place. But if you could reflect on that, I think that would be helpful.
Absolutely, Chair.
Councillor Barker-Lomax, did you have any further questions? Sorry, your microphone is off. Councillor Davison.
Sadly, I wasn't able to attend the meeting we had, well, you had, looking through and reviewing the our risk framework. I find I'm in disagreement with some of the ambers, which I feel should possibly be yellows. But that's probably because I don't understand or haven't fully appreciated the discussion which you must have had to get to that particular rating. Perhaps can I take up some of your time, please, outside the meeting, rather than go through it and no doubt send the rest of the committee to sleep? Thank you.
Through you, Chair. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Davison, for your comments. I was planning on reaching out via the Chair to the committee after this meeting to do something of a refresher on risk management, given there are some new members of the committee from when the strategy was adopted. So very happy to extend that invitation. So we'll get to that tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you.
I hope that satisfies you. Thank you, Councillor Davison. Councillor Beeman.
Just a small specific issue. Is there such a thing as a local risk register? Because, I mean, Farnham Park is in Farnham North West Ward, which I represent. And in fact, it's been drawn to my attention that the car park lining in that particular car park has faded away and is now causing, well, it's causing congestion. And in fact, blocking the possible access for emergency vehicles. Where would that go in such a thing, in such a register?
I'll invite the officer just to comment on that. This is, after all, the strategic risk register.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Beeman, for your question. Yeah, so the council's adopted risk management strategy is a 3 line of defence model. So the team, the asset management team that look after the car parks, are responsible for managing them in a way that mitigates and controls for risk, such as that you've described. If it's a council asset, so there's an expectation that management will deal with risk as part of business as usual. Clearly, part of managing that risk will be regular inspections, but also acting on any reports of defects in the fabric of the building. So very happy to take it offline, Councillor. If you're happy to forward over the concerns, we'll pass it on to the relevant team to pick up. Thank you.
Thank you very much. To note this updated strategic risk register, we have made comments, and I thank members for the consideration that they've given, and it's very pleasing to see. I think that clearly members have all read this report, because it is a very key part of the governance structures of the council. Thank you. Members are happy to note this report. Thank you. Item 12, the whistleblowing annual report. And I'll ask Deborah to just briefly outline the report, which is a requirement of this committee.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of things I'd like to bring to members' attention. The first is that the case in Appendix 1 is in fact closed, and members were all made aware of that at full council, which means that there are currently no whistleblowing cases for 24-25 at Waverley. I think it's important, though, that we should not be complacent, and we need to keep training our officers to recognise whistleblowing, because it's as bad to have no whistleblowing as it is to have lots of whistleblowing. So we need to make sure we've got a culture where people feel comfortable to come forward and whistleblow. And we have done some mandatory training recently of our senior officers to make sure that they're recognising matters that are in fact whistleblowing.
Thank you, Deborah. Any questions or comments for the officer? Councillor Barker-Lomax.
Have we, does our training on whistleblowing cater to the fact that, you know, we're getting closer to Guildford and they're slightly checkered past? I know I have to be careful when I speak, but do we address that kind of situation?
We ran the same training for both councils, and we used Protect, who are the, they used to be called Public Concern at Work. They're the leading charity for whistleblowing. So we decided we would bring some independence in to our training to help managers feel more confident as well about it. So obviously there are more cases at Guildford of whistleblowing, but really that is a positive thing, that people are feeling confident at Guildford that they can express concerns whether or not those matters are upheld.
Thank you. Well, I'm not quite sure whether I should be expecting for the next report to have many more reports of whistleblowing, and whether I should feel comfortable with that, but we'll take that when we get there. I'd ask members to please note the content. Sorry, Councillor Murray.
Sorry, could you tell us how many there are at Guildford? Is that something you can share?
I can share it. I think there's probably, off the top of my head, there's about 4 or 5 that are ongoing, currently being investigated.
Thank you. I'd ask members please to note the report, and thank you very much. I take that as noted.
Sorry, Chairman. Again,
Councillor Hine, I do apologise again. I'm not reading my briefing notes adequately.
This is the third of the 3 items that I indicated to speak on. Thank you very much. Yes, no whistleblowing, and I think a lot of residents and certainly some councillors would say because it's pointless and dangerous. As Deborah said, it's very important. It's part of our role and responsibility as councillors to be whistleblowers. We are duty bound to robustly scrutinise and if necessary, critique proposals and seek the truth on behalf of the residents that we serve, and that is without fear or favour. But the history shows that that doesn't work. It isn't working. We need to do something about it. We know there are problems at Guildford, and there's no reason to believe that those problems are not throughout ourselves and possibly every council in the country. But that doesn't mean that just because everybody's doing it, it doesn't mean that it mustn't be addressed. Personally, I've been continually punished for raising matters publicly. I've had 3 concocted vexatious standards complaints against me. I've had a dozen or so against me. 3 were upheld, despite court rulings confirming that I was correct in what I was saying, and that Officers of Natural England's complainants' position was wrong in law. And the court rulings were People over Wind and CG Fry, for your reference. I expect to be punished for what I've done, what I've said this evening in respect of unlawful activity regarding air quality and habitats legislation. I have been repeatedly. I expect it to happen again in this past year. As you know, I'm not allowed positions on committees. I was not allowed to contact officers over last year. All of my communications had to be via the borough solicitor. We haven't even got one at the moment. That was for me being right, and that was in respect of transgressions regarding EIA, the East Street scheme, air quality and traffic issues in farm
Councillor
and
Hyman,
habitats.
I think you're straying from the matter in hand, which is the whistleblower annual report.
But the point is, as I started, Chairman, which is that it is our responsibility to be whistleblowers, and we have the primary responsibility. The system is not working. It is pointless and it is dangerous to whistleblow. People know that it isn't working, and this committee, who should be robustly ensuring that we have good governance, I would expect to be acting upon it rather than simply being in denial. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hyman. Before I hand over to Councillor Follows, I would just comment that certainly we just heard the officer say that they regard whistleblowing as very serious and are doing training to make sure that all members of the council and officers are fully conversant with the process and the importance of a robust system. Thank you. Councillor Follows.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Some of you may know one of the parts of my paid employment outside of here is working in ethical conduct and standards in the defence sector. So I wanted just to give reassurance in the first instance that this is something that we take seriously, which obviously Deborah has said herself as well. Whistleblowing is not a dangerous thing to do. It is something that is an obligation, as Councillor Hyman confirms, but it is not a dangerous thing to do. I just want to also point out that I would also be concerned to see none, because it highlights perhaps that people don't know how to whistleblow. You will have noted, I'm sure, an email from the monitoring officer that was sent at my request to highlight to members how they deal with whistleblowing that might come to you, because of course you have a duty to whistleblow, but you will sometimes find in the course of being a councillor that people report whistleblowing activities to you, and also making sure the difference between whistleblowing and a grievance is understood. So I have requested further training for members on this as well, for both sides of the equation, but I just want to reinforce the comments from Debbie that whistleblowing is taken very, very seriously, and we just want to make sure that the processes for doing that are as clear as possible. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Can I ask members to please to note the contents of this report and the comments made by the officer? Thank you very much. Moving on to the data management and cyber report. And I'm going to ask both Nora and I think Howard to outline the report. No, that's Nora. There's Nora. I think you should assume that members have read the report, and I'd like to thank you for the detail that you've provided in here. So please can you keep your observations on the outline very brief. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. So as you remember, last year we have one report, and this year we've split it out two separate reports, so data management and cyber, and then also information governance that will be presented by my colleague Kieran in a second, just to make a kind of a clear distinction between the different functions. All I would like to say when it comes to introducing data management function is that what is awaiting us as a council is the biggest data assets aggregation and disaggregation exercise that we have ever seen in 50 years, as it is with LGR as well. So it is not something that is to be taken lightly. There will be lots of risks and challenges that will come with that. So in order to kind of come forward and support the organization, there is a work stream 3 within the program that I'm leading that will be concentrating on working with the service areas to make sure that we're preparing our information data assets for that change as well, work on data cataloging and understanding our current estate. That will help us then to have meaningful conversations for the next chapter. So that's all from me. I have also my colleague Howard that will be able to answer any questions on cyber. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I invite questions from councillors? Councillor Higgins.
Thank you, Nora, for such a comprehensive report. It was really interesting to read. Apologies if I've missed it, but when I was going through it, I couldn't find any information about tests like penetration tests, phishing tests, to essentially test our security controls and whether our training is working. Have we done tests like that?
I'm not sure if Howard is online. He would like to come on that item.
Yes, hello. So I would be happy to answer if you would like to arrange a meeting, but I don't want to do so in public.
Mr. Chairman, could I just highlight, we've actually arranged a meeting for this. A number of interested members of the executive asked very similar questions, and I'm very happy to extend that meeting both to the chair and the vice chair and any other interested members, the nerdy ones that love this sort of detail.
Thank you for that, and I'm sure some of the members of the committee will take you up on that. Thank you. Councillor Davidson.
Right. Could I just ask, when that's planned for?
It'll be in the next couple of weeks. If you could, through the chair, indicate whether you'd be interested in attending that meeting, I will make sure that it's done in a reasonable way.
I would, please, Chair.
Yeah, sorry, Councillor Higgins, you had one further question.
It was just in respect of accreditation, sort of independence. So, for example, ISO 27001 and Cyber Essentials Plus. Is that something we would consider going for, as I say, just for independent verification over our controls?
So we currently have, we are currently working towards PSN certification. So that is all.
Thank you. Councillor Davidson.
Thank you again, Chair. I think it's very comprehensive and quite reassuring report. But like Councillor Higgins, I do share concerns, particularly since over the last month or so, we've had these quite spectacular corruption of public company IT systems. It would appear that no one is completely immune. Well, one hopes that M&S, for example, have been as diligent about their cybersecurity as we are. What I would like to get some reassurance, and possibly this may come from the meeting the leader is arranging with the executive, is Plan B, an understanding of what that is, should that we be hit with a M&S style ransomware or whatever disruption to our services. I've had reassurance in the past that our use of the cloud, etc., gives us a certain degree of guarantee of continued service. I would like to see a bit more around it, and particularly what we have done as an organization to ensure that our staff are aware how to react in these situations and are trained to do so.
Thank you, Councillor. Will the officers, you take that?
I just wanted to advise Councillor Davidson that we do run ongoing training to our staff. We have a software that deploys little nuggets of knowledge throughout the year. So we have quite a big uptake throughout the workforce, and we feel that that is making some change already.
Thank you. I have one question for, I'm not sure whether Nora or Howard. I read the report. I think it's a very good one. I could see no reference to artificial intelligence in the report. I may have missed it, but we're seeing this is being used more and more, and it has risks and it needs to be managed. Is it not part of this report?
So, sorry if I may, Chair. So we are currently working on a joint AI policy between us and Guildford Borough Council as well, that will be deployed hopefully to our members of staff, and there will be some appropriate training to staff and councillors as well, probably I would expect in autumn time. So we're definitely considering that, but there's a lot to grapple with and kind of set up the context as well, what we as organization want to kind of take forward when it comes to the new technology and the risks involved with that.
Thank you. I'm sure this committee would like to get assurances on the way that that is being managed. So when that policy will come to a suitable fruition, if you could share that to the committee. Councillor Murray.
Yeah, Chairman. The report at the end of 4.2.2 under reflection the last paragraph says, finally, all eyes are on rapidly improving capabilities of artificial intelligence. And then they talk about how we can use AI within to, you know, that kind of thing. So he's making a thing that this is something which is going to come forward in the future. So there was a...
Indeed, Councillor Higgins just pointed that out.
Okay,
the
good.
error was saying for all eyes except the chairs.
Sorry, Chairman, I wasn't trying to
Thank
pick
you.
it. I was reading it. And this is really not my thing. You know, I mean, I'm glad you've got people in here who have this technology and are really interested in it. But as a people
Indeed.
person,
Well, I'd like to thank both the officers and your teams for the work that you're doing here and the clarity and the depth of these reports. And I'd ask the committee to please to note the reports.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We're now moving on to item 14, Information Governance and Data Transparency Report. Kieran, would you like to briefly outline this? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, the main point to note here is the increased collaboration between Guildford and Waverley councils over the past year or two, which has led to the current situation where we now have a joint data protection officer and a joint senior information risk owner for the two councils, which we had since the beginning of the current year, 2025. We now have a monthly committee known as the Information Risk Group, the IRG, which oversees all matters data protection, cybersecurity and information governance and management, records retention management related, which it mirrors an existing committee which we've had at Guildford for a number of years now. We continue to closely monitor any data breaches. We plan to embark on an increased programme of staff training in data protection. Online training in short courses is now currently available, but we plan to roll out a more sort of comprehensive training program to also include more detailed sessions and bespoke training tailored towards specific service areas depending on the demand. So regarding freedom of information and environmental information regulations, we've had a restructure of the current information governance team. It's now headed by myself, the information governance team leader / data protection officer. And as previously noted, we have more overlapping requests which apply equally to both Guildford and Waverley. For example, such as questions on the management structure, in which case we would send out the same response from both Guildford and Waverley for that particular request. We continue to monitor key performance indicators with the overall aim of striving towards as near as possible to a compliance rate of 100% of all requests being answered within the statutory 20 working day time limit.
Sorry.
Thank you. Yeah, it seems to me we're at risk of a few interventions by the ICO. So 62% of SARS don't meet statutory timelines. And so, you know, pretty much 40% do. So we've got a systemic breach there. That puts us at risk of ICO imposed penalties. So that's a big contingent liability in my mind of up to 4% of our overall income. And then if we look at the FOIs, same again, we've got 24% of our FOIs don't meet statutory timelines. And the threshold below which ICO will act is 90%, so we're significantly below that. And then thirdly, we've got 44 data breaches. So it seems to me there are three areas here where we're at risk of ICO intervention and or penalties and or notices, which raises, you know, further contingent liabilities of decent sums of money. So I mean, I think we need a pretty urgent action plan here.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. Well, to clarify the matter, the figures you quote are for the previous calendar year. So it is worth noting that we have had a significant improvement in figures in the previous 6 months. In mitigation, we did have we had various changes of personnel within the last we've had three different data protection officers in the past 2 years, so that's obviously caused upheavals, and we had a recent restructure which I think it's fair to say we are more of a cohesive unit now. And in terms of the freedom of information figures, I should point out that for the last number of months we've had performance figures at 90% or more. So we certainly are improving since the previous year.
Councillor.
Yeah, so this is not a criticism. Our job
Yes.
here is to look at risk. And it seems to me that there are big risks arising from last year's failure to hit certain statutory timelines to a certain level.
Thank you. Councillor Murray.
Yeah, just following on from Councillor Barcolomax's comments, and isn't that not also on the KPIs for ONS? Are those in there about FOI requests and other? I'm not too sure, Luke, if you can. I think they were. I'm not too sure. If they're not, then it might be a good thing to have them on.
Yes, they are. Yeah, we would compile regular figures which are published with the other KPIs.
Councillor Higgins.
Yep, they are in ONS because I've raised a question about this as well in terms of subject access requests. It says in the report again that one of the reasons for non-compliance or low compliance was due to complex redactions of documents. And I did raise in overview and scrutiny that actually there's no legal obligation to provide documents, just the data that we hold, the information that we have. I don't know whether changes have been made subsequent to that, or if we haven't, whether it's worth speaking to the legal team and seeing if you can save time and improve those rates.
Yeah, the point is noted. Yeah, we as previously mentioned, we do have a more sort of a cohesive team since the restructure. So figures have improved. And your point is noted. So yes, we do hope to achieve an effective regime in the coming months.
Thank you. Yes, I would suggest that I'd ask you to note this committee's perhaps concerns that we're still not meeting all the statutory obligations, or indeed I think the corporate target was 90%. I do question whether a 90% target on something that's a statutory requirement is appropriate. But I'd ask you to note that, and to, in your next report, please address exactly how we're trying to get to that. I'm going to take Councillor Follows next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And just to comment on Councillor Higgins' point, this is something I also raised with CSIRO, and my understanding is that redaction issue is being dealt with. Just in general, the revised legal team arrangements that were agreed at Council last night and will hopefully come into effect soon will also provide greater resilience in that, and will also, I think, deal with. We've managed to break the back of the FOIs and the subject access requests. We had a bit of a backlog. I think we're now at the point where we're pretty much back to business as usual, and we'll hit those targets quite reasonably. And also just give members reassurance. I do have a lot of interactions with the ICO in my other hat, and the only time they will even get close to putting those kind of fines on you is if you are willfully negligent in what you're doing, and we're sitting here completely ignoring everything in front of you. So there is always a dialogue with the ICO, and we would be having that long before we would be having any interventions. And I think, as you've seen here, we are not doing nothing about these things.
Councillor Davidson.
Thank you, Chair. Perhaps I should have brought this up underneath the previous item, but it's related to do with data. What reminds me is the beautiful little diagram at the front of page 1 of the Data Management and Cyber Framework report. The 11 o'clock bubble is disposed. What hasn't come clear to me is whether we have a clear policy in place, and whether that policy is actually being acted on to remove redundant data, and particularly to remove records, both paper as well as electronic. Removal of them and publicly making sure that they are what our policy is helps to protect us from unnecessary queries about our past and keeps us clear of having to keep on having to look back at our past behaviour. Is there such a policy in place, and are we actually
we're
doing it?
We're currently working on a joint policy for the two councils. We have recently updated our records retention management schedule, which is a comprehensive guide to how long each category of document should be kept. So it's very, very clear and detailed, and it lists the appropriate legislation for how long a particular item should be kept. I mean, well, I don't know if my colleague Nora would like to come in on that, because she's also been working on the project.
Thank you very much, Chair. So one of the work streams for the coming year is data disposition, data deletion. So looking at automation in our line of business systems. Some of the systems already have modules that allow us data deletion in kind of more systematic way. Document control is another matter, because we need to kind of look at our environments and set up some kind of metadata in indexing as well. But we are working on it actively to make sure that the staff don't have to manually go and remember to delete something, but also we are using automation and systems to help us be very on top of everything and dispose things within the timescales that Kieran alluded within the retention schedule.
If I may, Chair, I would urge to make sure that this policy is public, because it helps then to control questions on our past.
Yeah, yes. A good point, because it is actually part of our aim to be as transparent as possible. So coming back to the freedom of information issue, like it is our objective really to have as much information as possible to proactively available on the public website. So just to improve our sort of transparency with the public, also as well as to reduce the number of requests we get, so which would lead to sort of a more effective administration within the council and the more specifically the information governance department. So yeah, we do have various sort of documents publicly available, and we are aiming to improve that to the highest degree possible.
Thank you, Kieran, and thank you for the report. I'd ask the committee please to note the report and approves both the content and the receiving of the 2 annual updates. I hear that noted and approved. Thank you very much. We now come to the Audit and Risk Annual Report. Kimberly, would you like to briefly outline what we have in front of us?
Thank you, Chair. The SIPVA guidance sets out that we should self-evaluate ourselves each year. Unfortunately, this was missed off the agenda for the June meeting last year. So as members will see, I have included a annual report for both 23-24 and 24-25 in this report. The report basically just sets out the work that the audit committee have carried out in those years, who the membership were, and any specific topics that we received briefing on or that we raised for scrutiny within the Audit and Risk Committee. As members will see, we are going to discuss self-assessment further later on in the evening when we finish the agenda. But I just ask members to note the work carried out in the last 2 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Kimberly. Could I just also ask, does this report form the basis that we will be reporting to council on our activity? Or is that a separate report?
No, I believe that does go to council reporting on our activity, yes. I think it goes as part of the minutes of this meeting.
Okay, thank you for that. Members, does anyone have a question on this report? I hope it's a factual report on what we've done. Good. So please can members note both the 2023-24 report and the 24-25 report, recognising that a number of you were not present for some of them. All noted. Thank you. Takes us to our final public item, which is our recurrent annual work programme. This is something we have on every committee, detailing what will be coming up. And we're invited to both note it and make any particular comments on the activities. So you'll be able to see what is due for us in September and November and so forth, bearing in mind that a number of these are prescribed reports that we have to receive. Councillor Follows.
That's all right, Julian, thank you. You mentioned during the session that you would like a report from the Joint Governance Committee in terms of the Joint Constitutional Review Group, even, my apologies, too many acronyms in this place, to give you an update on what they did. If you did want that, probably Andy MacLeod as its co-chair and me would be the most appropriate people, along with Deborah, of course, would be the most important to do that. I would also request, if you're happy to take a request, I would like to bring the community asset transfer policy back for a review and an amendment to enhance it. I would prefer to do that having with a cycle back to the Audit and Risk Committee to review it both in substance and its impacts, if possible.
If I just comment on that policy, I think that would be a very good thing, because I'm very conscious that there are certainly accounting issues that need to be considered, and I think this committee would be the appropriate place to get assurance that the correct accounting of any asset transfers is being done. So yes, thank you, Councillor. I saw someone else's hand there. Councillor Murray.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm just looking at the forward plan, and it seems like we've got 14 or 15 in September and only half a dozen in November. Is there any chance to even it out a little bit so that those September's one, or is it just because November's one's not filled in with a big agenda yet? I just think sometimes the agenda is so long that we tend to, maybe not look in detail at the last few. And if there's an opportunity to move some of the September into November, you might get a better, you may be able to look at them in a bit more detail. But maybe there's a reason why they're all in September.
Thank you. Kimberly, could I ask you to look and see whether we can level up the playing field a little bit? There's nothing.
Spread the love.
There may be annual requirements that we have to do.
Could be, yeah.
But if there aren't, I take your point.
Yeah, I'll speak to officers and find out which ones need to come to September and which ones can be carried over to November.
Thank you very much. So I think that, I believe, draws us to the end of the public meeting. I would ask if members are happy to stay behind in closed session to briefly go through the sort of self-assessment that SIPFA asked us to do. But I'd like to thank officers for having stayed for the meeting, for their reports and the contributions that they've made. You give us assurance on many items, and we appreciate that. So thank you, all the officers, and I